Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Kevin. Technically black metal-ish, but almost feels like a genre deconstruction as it subverts basically all the traditional staples. Lyrically, an adoption of a 1900s poem by Thomas Hardy. We're going to be looking at the group Wreche. The song in question is The Darkling Thrush from All My Dreams Came True, a 2021 album. Let's dive into this. See what Wreche is bringing to the table today. Bit of an eerie, unsettling beginning. This is a cool idea, but I think the execution is leaving me wanting a bit. That's a playful drum idea. of intensity, drum accents off beat. Drummer's really great. It's interesting just to how black metal it is in composition, but how a timbral shift can change the overall feeling of it. Honestly, I think that the album art here is a perfect representation of how I feel about the song so far. Section is such an antithesis to that middle moment that I really enjoyed. Slightly detuned organ synth. Oh, just end in the middle of that idea. Okay. No resolution there. All right. Like I was saying, what I find really interesting about this is how it is definitely still black metal. There's 16th notes constantly, all the time, with, well, this is interesting because we do have a pulse here. We have that bum, 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 bum. There's an emphasized first note that tends to be played both in, I think, the left hand as well as the right hand, as far as the piano is concerned. Although I think there's more than one piano player here, or I should say more than one recorded piano player. It could be just that the pianist double tracks and basically they're playing four hands worth of music. But there is a lower pulse that happens underneath the higher 16th note movement. We'll talk about that later because that's actually a bit of a deviation from black metal. It's pretty cool. But we have constant 16th notes. We do have a pulse here, which is a little bit of a deviation. The drums are a lot of blast beats, lots of constant 16th notes, very rigid, very fast and repeating. At least this is how the song starts. And then we also have, the growling. This is, aside from the intro, pretty straightforward black metal for about 2.5 or 3 minutes. At this point, I was like, okay, I don't know what this guy's on. Maybe it's just the piano, right? It's a piano instead of guitar, so it's subversive. And I was like, I'm not seeing where it deviates. This is just black metal to my ears. But it's everything after the 3 minute mark where I think we begin to explore some interesting ways of playing around with the black metal sound and black metal composition, and exploring what it can do, because it does one thing very well, which is atmosphere, and they explore that. Of course, it's sort of baked into the genre, but they also explore melody. They explore rhythm. They already explore harmony. I mean, that's the atmosphere part. Before we get into that, though, there is one thing that I really don't like here. I hate the production on the vocals and the synths. And it's because of the intro, it's because of the first verse. It is muddy. The piano, crisp and clear. Although I do think that they're allowing it to reverberate during the verse, which just doesn't work with the 16th note thing idea. The drums are pretty crisp and clear as well. But the verse just sounds like a muddy haze. And that's where I actually said, I think the album art really works for me on that because it depicts flowers, but out of focus. You get a little bit above that's sort of transparent. You get a little below that's transparent. And then there's the flower in between. And like, you can see that this is a picture of flowers, but it's like, what's going on? It's out of focus. That's what the music feels like to me so often in these large bombastic sections, is that I can hear what's going on, but it just doesn't come across as anything other than a muddy, blurry mess. And I'm going to wager that that is purposeful for some reason. But the reverb on the vocals, the reverb on the exterior synth, and like I said, I think the piano, at least one of the piano lines, is reverberating as well. And I wish more instruments had less reverb on them, less allowing of the note to ring out. You just get the hit and then that's done. I think that would work so much better, but it would be a very different atmosphere too. And if that's not what they want to make, then that would be the wrong way to go about doing it. But I don't know. There's just so many moments I was like, it just sounds like a mess. And I personally wasn't a big fan of those. But I had mentioned that there's something cool happening beneath all this. You see, the piano is playing 16th notes, but typically in black metal, when you have guitars, you'll have two guitarists, frequently, both playing constant 16th notes, but playing different lines, creating harmony. Sometimes they'll play the exact same movement. They will change pitches at the same time, and when they change pitches, it'll be the same interval. So maybe they'll both go up a third, down a third, down a second, but they're always going to be the same distance apart. Sometimes they aren't, and you get these constantly changing gaps between the two instruments. I like those typically more in black metal. Some really cool stuff there. Here, though, we're not just playing one note really fast. There's actually a constant rundown on the piano. Just diddle-diddle, 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 just picking a higher note and playing a few notes under it. And that's where what I think the left hand comes into play, or one of the left hands, where we have this impulse on beat one. Da 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 da, and that emphasis at the beginning. It first of all, this left hand. Well, this is my left hand, but cameras mirror stuff. Anyways, where the left hand is playing a single note, it actually moves. So you might get this pitch, and then it goes up a little, then goes down a little. Whereas the movement over here on the right is static. It's constant. It's this four-note descent over and over and over. And so you do get that 16th note movement, but it's not just them, jamming on a single key over and over and over and over. And to me, it creates a little bit of beauty because of the dexterity here. It isn't just, aggressively strumming a single note. It is this quick flourish that happens. And I use these phrases very specifically to showcase the way that I understand these two types of approaching this fast playing. But it allows us to keep the 16th note energy going without resorting to a simple, straightforward idea, but it also allows us to build that melody out of it. It's part of the thing about playing these notes for such a long time in black metal is that you change your pitch slowly, but enough to create a melody. It's just instead of holding out a note, bum, 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 instead of that, you just and you just, play that note over and over and over rather than allow it to ring out. But here, if you're just playing a descending line over and over and over, you don't have melody there. You have an ornamental concept, a little flourish. So that's where the other one comes in, that bum, 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 bum. It allows you to create this melodic element of black metal alongside, instead of being a part of, the fast 16th note movement. This ends up working really well. It adds extra depth to this style of writing. And I think separating out the intensity, the rhythmic intensity, and the melody greatly aids in my enjoyment of the black metal approach. It isn't so much that black metal is consistent, rigidly 16th notes, which, yeah, I mean, that is kind of a problem, but for me, subjectively, But at the end of the day, really just splitting it out allows you to do more interesting things with your melody while still retaining that intensity. And that's might have been what I needed all along. Just a little bit of dynamic writing, a little bit of extra depth. I kind of like what's going on here in regards to that. It's pretty cool. But another thing that stands out to me is also layering. As I mentioned, I think there's more than two piano hands here. This may be a song written for two pianists. And that's not counting synth, which we're going to get to in a second, but I feel like I hear a lot of piano work at the bottom. And it's just, the more I envision it, the less it's possible to do with just two hands. And so we have a lot of layering there regarding harmony, regarding layered melodies, with layered ornamental ideas. And it's just a way of bringing all these concepts together. Black metal to me is very flat, especially when I think of traditional third wave black metal. You got two guitars playing 16th notes, a bass player that's invisible in the mix, and the drummer who's just mashing 16th notes out too. And it sort of just becomes this static layer of sound. You might have melody out of it, but it's really not too focused on that as much as it's about this dark, ominous, foreboding, heavy atmosphere. And this sort of retains some of that weight and atmosphere, especially harmonically, but it pairs it with dexterous layers. It pairs it with counterplay. You don't just have two guitars playing the same thing. We have this layered movement on the right hand, melody on the left hand, you have ornamental melody on another hand, you have harmony coming in from another hand. There's so much going on here. And to me, it adds a richness to the sound that black metal tends to veer away from. But then there's also the synthesizer, which sits up further outside of this and adds more emotion and character to it. First, having a bit of an electronic synthesizer sound, sure, but also bringing in some brass in that final movement. Just kind of mash those two words together. That final movement. Yeah, we had like this really big trombone and tuba brassy section behind everything too, and it's just it adds character. You're painting with the larger color palette, and that's going to allow for more expression. I don't necessarily want to say it's better. You can certainly create amazing works of art in just black and white, and the same is true with music. You can make amazing things with just two instruments or four in, the scope of a metal band. But if you know what you're doing, you can certainly use a wider color palette to great effect. And I think that's what happens here. And I just typically lean towards wider palettes. I like to hear the contrast and the variance of timbre, and that's what we get on this track. But it's not just about expanded colors. Also, what kind of ideas are we creating with these colors? And that's where I think the intro, the outro, and the midtro really speak to me. These are moments to get away from the metallic movement. We might still have that darker quality to the chord progression and atmosphere, but it's done with a bit more of a lighter touch, more dexterous rather than weighty and plodding. We get these beautiful piano lines, melodies, and harmony. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I find it really interesting that somebody can play this way and still want to write or play more straightforward, aggressive metal music. But I think it creates great contrast here, too. We get a little bit of both melodically driven music and atmospheric and rhythmically driven music. And the bouncing back and forth happens at a good enough pace that I find that it's not too overwhelming in some areas than others. Granted, I think I'd like more of the melodic passages on this just a little bit, but I think that's just my lack of enjoyment of just constant 16th notes. I still think the flourish that they did here is pretty cool, and it's a nice twist on the formula, but at the end of the day, it's still a very repetitive concept, and I tend to grow weary of that rather quickly. Um, But yeah, so we have these melodic passages in these parts, but I think what's interesting too is we got a little bit of a taste of the drums right before the first section, the first metal inspired section of this track. But in the middle of the song, we actually got to hear some very cool melodic drumming using the vast majority of the kit. Granted, I think it was still tom and snare oriented, but we did get to hear some more cymbal work coming out of it. And I loved this. It's a little bit of a moment to sort of peer into the drummer's wider skill set. And I think it's something we just don't get to see too often in black metal. uh, I look at the dexterity of these drummers. I'm like, dude, you can put on 40, 50-minute sets of just constant 16th notes. I can't imagine how badly your muscles are screaming at the end of the night and how much icy hot you got to use to get through a tour. But these drummers probably have more chops. This is just the type of music they prefer to play, or it's the type of music that their band and the music that they are playing demands. But you got to figure if somebody can play black metal, the speed, the intensity, the precision of that, they probably have chops for other stuff too. They just don't get to showcase it. And I think that's what I love about the middle section here is a little bit of a chance for the drummer to show off a little bit in a less aggressive style and to kind of see something a little more with a deft hand, a little bit more nuance to it. And that paired with the beautiful piano melody, I mean, that was just a gorgeous little middle part. And I wish we could have extended that out a little and explored it more. Um, and so, at this point, We're going to hit the lyrics right here because I think I'm done speaking about this. I mean, this is really cool. It's still not my cup of tea. It's still very black metal, but if I had to pick a black metal band to listen to, this would probably be in the choices for me. I think it's a very cool inversion, and I do love how it subverts the idea entirely at times and deviates completely from the concept of black metal to explore other types of playing while still being beautiful and intricately written piano work. The vocals, I think, are the sore spot for me, where the drums get a chance to flourish and showcase a bit, and the piano is kind of mesmerizing all throughout, but definitely during the more melodic bits, the vocalist never gets to expand out in any direction and explore anything a bit lighter or more melodic. It is just always monotone shouting with a ton of reverb, and I'm not a big fan of that to begin with, but the reverb muddies up what I enjoy about the song. And so I really didn't like when the vocals came in, not because of the vocalist himself, but because of the production on the vocals. I would have just loved a little bit more clarity and physicality to the vocals on this to pair with the excellent production on everything else. But again, like I said, that changes the entire feeling of the song, so maybe that's not what they necessarily want. I'm going to find some lyrics to this and we're going to wrap this one up. And this song appears to be about somebody who is not having the best day, or maybe even the best month. And they find that in things that they used to enjoy, they find only sorrow there. It says, memories on every corner, a shadow in the city, tirelessly, effortlessly awake. No matter what, he can't find light or brightness in the city anymore. It's just darkness everywhere. And as he calls it, it's tireless and effortless. It means nothing for the shadow to exist here. Towards the end of the song, he says, to see the sun, to feel this rage, what will set my heart ablaze? To meet the golden day and make happiness come back again? He questions, is there anything that can bring this happiness back, that can set my heart on fire again, that can make my life less cold and dark? But ultimately, does not come upon a conclusion. Finishes up the story, says, an evening sky, light upon the leaves, sentimental visions, a hideous derision, it's war that makes decisions. I like this final line. War, I think, as a synonym for conflict. Being in a specific case and wanting something else. That's his conflict. He wants to get rid of the shadow and find happiness again. And that this is what's going to cause him to make decisions. And I think the implication here is that the decisions aren't great. War typically causes us to make the best decisions in life, and it tends to bring more violent choices. And I think that kind of is alluding here that he will not find happiness again, that the darkness will cause him to make worse and worse decisions in hopes of finding joy, but will begin to become ever more fleeting because of it. I think that fits the chaos and darkness of the track. I like the poetic angle here, both in language and in topic and how it's spoken about. I think that pairs well with the rejection of guitars and inclusion of piano in a black metal track. This feels like black metal lyrics, but lightened up a little bit. The edges sanded down, much like the piano brings an interesting flair to the black metal approach. Yeah, it all kind of comes together for me in an interesting way. I do think, dang, I think I want to listen to another track. I'm not sold on an album of this yet, but I have optimism for. This might be black metal I could listen to. It still veers a bit on the metal side for me, and the vocals are going to be a really big hurdle, but like I said earlier, if I was forced to listen to a whole black metal album, and I had the choice of which, this would be in the runnings for what I would pick. Those are my thoughts. Wreche's The Darkling Thrush. Let me know what you thought of this track. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on, maybe you just have your own interpretation or opinion on this song. Put all of that and any other thoughts you have down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.